Hi, everybody, and welcome to Martinis with Scott, a show about winning momentum in business and in life. Social separation has been hard on everyone during this COVID virus pandemic. Let's talk about the most extreme examples. I was looking through some stats the other day. Suicide rates are expecting to spike related to COVID-19 with unprecedented levels of unemployment, worsening existing mental health conditions. There's no evidence in historical literature that directly relates such a crisis from this pandemic to suicide rates, but there is existing literature that points to other crises and natural disasters such as floods and fires and economic downturns. So there's a clear link between suicide and other mental health issues, anxiety, stress, these sorts of things, substance abuse. There's a clear link between these traumatic events and mental health problems. For every 1% increase, this just blew me away, for every 1% increase in unemployment, there's a corresponding 0.79% spike in suicide, according to that research. And in most cases, it takes 12 to 18 month lagging indicator. So you have the crisis, and then a year later, a year and a half later, the suicide rate spikes as a result. And why is it lagging? Why is it 12 to 18 months later? Because they call it a layering effect. And you have all of these negative feelings, such as job security, loss of routine, isolation. These negative feelings layer on top of each other, and the combination just has devastating effect on people. You know, I never used to give any credit to this routine issue, but as a father of a young child, I just, more and more just forcing in routine during these unusual times where we're all staying at home. And I think it's really important. I think people are lost without that routine. So we're seeing a lot of mental health problems. I've been wanting to do this show for a while. It's not just suicide, that's the extreme example, but anxiety, stress, substance abuse, the feeling of being frozen, or worse, the feeling of spiraling out of control, of spiraling in a downward negative projection. You need to be aware of this not only for yourself, but as a business owner or manager. You need to be yourself and your family, but also for your employees. It's your responsibility as a leader to give those that report to you and your co-workers some assistance in dealing with these mental health issues. So with all of that being said, what a better time to have a martini and a discussion with the great Kevin Waldbillig, who is a registered psychotherapist in private practice in Oakville, Ontario, and a good friend, by the way. His career has worked, in his career, he's been a college professor, a mental health consultant, certified executive coach. He believes that a healthy lifestyle is key to maintaining physical and mental well-being, and advises coaches and others on ways that could help manage the mental health issues that they're facing. Kevin's company is called ChangeWorks Interactive, changeworksinteractive.com. There'll be a link in the notes for you. And he's accessible on most popular social media platforms. And if I recall correctly, he also gives his cell phone number and other contact information in the show itself. It says here on the notes that he's enjoying a nice gin and tonic, and he's having an Empress 1908 gin, which I believe he tells me is from Victoria, BC, and the bottle was courtesy of his nephew that lives in British Columbia. In this show, we talk about managing stress, both yours, your employees, family members, managing mental health, motivation, unhealthy thinking patterns, the importance of goals, and a number of other topics relevant to business in general, mental health in general, and specifically during this crisis. Enjoy the show. If you hit the like button if you like it, and please subscribe. We are on the Martinis with Scott channel is on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Thank you for listening.
Hey, Kevin, welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Where are you at? Looks like you're in your home office there.
I'm in Oakville.
Oakville, Ontario. We have a global audience, so we have a Torontonian.
Yeah. I know there's an Oakville, California as well. So yeah, beautiful Oakville, Ontario.
There you go. Well, cheers. Welcome to the show.
Cheers. Same to you, Scott. Good to see you again.
A gin and tonic.
Mm.
I had a nice fellow. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I've got a nephew that lives out in BC, and he introduced me to this gin called 1908 Empress, the Empress Hotel in Victoria, and he was nice enough to bring me out a bottle. And the color of this stuff it's amazing. Like it's a beautiful sort of lavender purple color, and it's actually pretty cool because when you add the gin into it, the pH changes and it turns to a different color. It's very
Really?
cool. It's very cool, yeah.
Cool. Now that I know remember that you're a gin drinker, we have a local distiller in Fernie, where I am right now, in Fernie, British Columbia. And they make vodka and gin, and it's outstanding. But awesome. I just had a nice fellow drop by my house and give me a bottle of Belvedere, so I just poured it on ice, and that's what I'm up to.
Perfect.
So, Kevin, you and I are from 30 years ago school buddies. We played on some hockey teams together, where you were a much better player than I was. My first question is, what is the over-under on us getting through an hour of not calling each other inappropriate hockey nicknames? Because I'm not sure I could do it.
Yeah, you know what? We'll try to be polite. We'll try to be polite, but yeah. That was, I do the same thing, Scotty. When I go back in time and I think, wow, that was 35 years ago, or that was 30 years ago. Man, lots of fun though. We used to go on a lot of hockey tournaments that were sort of outside the Ottawa area, and we go to these little towns and have lots of fun. And some of those guys that we played hockey with, I still see a few of those guys around, so that's always fun.
Oh, yeah. Kevin, you're, in the lead-in video to this, I got to give your whole CV in that. So we're not doing that now, as I mentioned to you. But you are a registered psychotherapist. You've been a college professor, or maybe you still are, a mental health consultant, certified executive coach. And I noted that part of what you do is you believe in physical and mental well-being, which seemed appropriate to invite you to a martini show. And I'm excited to talk about this topic today because it's the first time on Martinis with Scott I truly have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. And so it's going to be a bit more of a conversation, a bit more of an interview and picking your brain, which I'm excited about. But it feels to me, Kevin, that this is just we're a business show. Well, we're a business, and through business, having abundance in life. So there's an overlap. And the older I get, the more I understand that businesses are made of people, and human problems are business problems. And I think when I was younger, I didn't grasp that very well. And as I said, the older I get, the more I get that. But just feels like a huge topic in the world today, and particularly in America. Maybe a lesser extent in Canada, but still a huge topic. And what I don't really get is, have I been ignorant for 30 years and I'm waking up to this now, or has things changed? Like, do you have a perspective of that from your practice?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We're more exposed to what's going on now. In Canada, we've had a lot of different campaigns. If you follow a fellow like Michael Landsberg, who's on TSN, he's a big, proponent of mental health, and Bell Let's Talk is a good example of how we're exposing ourselves a little bit more to what's going on out there. I have the opportunity as well, Scott, if I am speaking to a group of people, and you ask a question, a generic question like, has there been anybody, have you personally, or has there been anybody in your family that's been impacted by mental health? I think you'd be hard pressed not to see everybody in the crowd stick their hand up and say, it's impacted my I got a cousin that's having a hard time, or it could be a little closer to home, or I remember my dad, going through certain things. I think the prevalence of it is so much, and I think there's some other factors as well that that kind of play into this that we're dealing with now that maybe we didn't see those 30 years ago, or maybe we didn't see before that time.
What percentage of, if you had 100 cases of what you would think to be a mental health issue 20 years ago, what percentage of those would we have said, suck it up?
I think that was the common message,
But in 80% of the cases and 20% of the cases, or?
I think back 30, 40 years ago, it'd probably be higher than that, Scott.
Really?
Yeah. I think that was the message, was suck it up. I'll tell you though, like in my line of work, I get a chance to speak to a lot of different folks, business leaders, people that are working on the ground floor, people that are working in hospitals, a real wide range of people. Those symptoms that people are experiencing, or that sort of that stress, that everyday stress that people are going through, it doesn't discriminate. It really doesn't have any bearing on what you do for a living, but it does impact a heck of a lot of people, and it's concerning to me. And when it does hit close to home, that's when it really does concern. And I know you were talking, and I'll just jump on a little bit of a tangent there. You were talking before, and I saw one of your episodes in the past. You were talking about your daughter and some of the fears that she was having. Those fears would be a lot different than some of the fears that people have now. But fear is fear, and how do we cope with that? I mean, that's a good question, is how do we cope with that fear?
So on that episode, I my daughter had a nightmare for monsters. And so because I was listening to a podcast, probably from Jordan Peterson, but don't hold me to that, but probably that's what I was listening to. And I got the idea of, hey, let's draw the monster. And she drew it, and it was a really good drawing, and it was really specific. I don't remember the details right now, but it was clearly, it came from somewhere. And she finished drawing and she showed it to me, and then she looked at it, and it was, swear to God, it was like a light switch went off. Like she's just like, oh, that's not so bad. I think she looked at me, she says, I think maybe we could be friends. And so we named it, and it wasn't gradual over time. It was just bang. She just faced that fear. And I thought that was such an amazing thing. And, one of my rare good dad moments, clearly.
Yeah. No, and what you're doing there, Scott, with your daughter is, I think that's bang on. So, what is it? What is it with the fear? And it depends what context you're in. I mean, we have families, we have kids. They have fears. They have things that they're dealing with. But in a work context too, people have fears about what's going on and what's going on now. But what you did, I think what you did that was great was that you named it. You gave it a target. You gave it a name. Yeah. And we do the same thing when we're dealing with some mental health issues, or we're dealing with stress and burnout. Is that we try to name it, and then we try to describe it in as much detail as we can. And then the latter part of that is that we try to expose ourselves to those things that we're fearful of. That is a process that needs to be worked through with a professional. And it's like coaching. So back to our hockey example way back when, we need somebody to remind us of those things that that keep us healty, or that keep us
productive. It's the dealing with stress is an educated response. An experiential response. So in the turnaround business, when we go into troubled companies, those that are experiencing significant stress, the turnaround professionals, which is a small group even in Canada, like in the whole country, we all talk to each other, and we kind of muse that it's interesting to us that we are completely numb to the stresses that the management team may be experienced, because to us, it's not even a crisis. And to them, they feel like they're going to be dead, today. But it's
Yeah.
because we expose ourselves to that level of stress on a regular basis. And so it's not like the more you expose yourself to these sorts of situations, the better off you are, right? I mean, that's sort of what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Scott?
Yeah.
When you're dealing with stress, okay, what are some of the strategies that you might have that have worked for you personally when you're stressed out? Because I think what happens is a person could think about, yeah, I'm either stressed or I'm not stressed, and maybe in some ways it's a choice. I could walk into that stress, or I could take a step back from that. But I'd be curious to know about yourself. Like, how do you?
So what
how do
I
you manage that?
I may not be a great person to answer that, because I seem to just kind of float in my own little bubble, and I don't really I don't really experience stress, and I've done that my whole life, right? So
Yeah.
I think I'm lucky that way. Which is not to say that I don't internalize it and don't recognize that. I'm sure that happens, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but there's crap that we all have to deal with in our lives, including in running a business, and like firefighting and emergencies and things that just put you in a bad mood. And what I
Yeah.
do in my own businesses and in my own career, and in my own personal life, and what I tell everybody that I work with, is here's what you're going to do. What is the time of day when you're most productive and most mentally capable and strong to deal with that stuff that's stressing you out and that you hate? And for me, it used to be midnight. And I find now it's 7 in the morning, right? Because it changes over time. And what
Yeah.
I do is I say, give yourself 2 hours, a maximum of 2 hours, and work like hell and plow through as much as you can in those 2 hours. Okay. And then
Yeah.
stop, because your option is to work 10 hours a day on that stuff and be unproductive because you're just worrying and you're depressing yourself. If you do it for 2 hours, now you've got 8 hours in a 10-hour workday to work on positive things. And when I mean positive, I don't mean stuff that makes you happy. I mean things that are moving you towards your aim, that are productive and remind you why you're in business to begin with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's just really important, because in turnarounds, what happens is, the first person to go is the controller, because they're the one taking the angry phone calls, trying to negotiate payment schedules. Your top sales guy goes because you're not shipping any product, your fill rates are down, your customers are yelling at you, and you're just telling lies all the time. You don't mean to tell lies,
Yeah.
but you say, yeah, I'm going to ship. We'll ship to you next Wednesday. It's on the schedule. I went and looked. They'll ship to you next Wednesday, and then, nobody ships Wednesday because you don't have any product.
Yeah.
And so those people get burned out. And a great controller is going to last 6 months in that situation before they either leave or they just turn ugly, right? And irredeemably ugly, not a little bit ugly. Like,
Yeah.
they'll stick it out, but there's no choice but to change them at the end of the day, because they never get to see the light again. And so the answer for me is you got to do the work. You got to fight those fires, but you don't have to do it all day, every day. And you don't have to worry about it nonstop. Do it, and then give your brain something positive to work on towards your aim. That's what I try to do.
I think that's a really good strategy. I have a brother of mine that's he's worked in the Emerge department in Kitchener-Waterloo for 30 years. He's an old guy in this field, and I was wondering about that. As sort of the years ticked off with him, how is it that you compartmentalize that you can deal with a situation? Many of the business examples that you just cited. They may be similar in some ways to what's coming through the door. So for my brother Dave, I always wondered about that. Whatever's coming through the door, you're going to address what's happening right now. But then at some point, your work day is going to end, and then you become a dad, or you become a partner, or you're hanging out with the guys playing hockey on a Tuesday night. How do you turn that off, or how do you compartmentalize that? And that's a good question. That's a good question.
But I think the answer in my 2 hours a day is you're done.
Yeah.
Right? You've focused, And the interesting thing about that strategy, Kevin, I find is that you're just as productive. Like if you had your whole to-do list of fires in emergencies,
Yeah, yeah,
if you worked 8 hours a day, you're not going to do more work than if you just focus really hard on 2 hours a day. The
right.
really hard feels good, right? It feels like you really pounded it out. But then the rest of the day, you're focused on moving things forward. Because what happens the entire premise of Martinis with Scott and my business career is momentum, right? And I'm sure you see the same in personal therapy and
Mm-hmm.
coaching with people is it's not about absolute where you are. It's about how you feel about the direction that you're going. And that
Right.
is the most important thing. I always say, would you rather be an investor in a company? If I gave you a company and it's got, 5 million in revenue and $1 million in profit, but company A last year, did 10 million in revenue and 4 million in profit versus company B, which also has 5 million in revenue, 1 million in profit, but came from say 2 billion in revenue and a loss, right? They're
Yeah,
both in absolute terms, they're in the same place. Which one do you feel better about, right? And obviously the one that's
yeah,
growing, not the one that's going backward. Is the direction that matters, I think, to the human psyche.
yeah,
And which is why just take a limited amount of time to deal with the shit, and
yeah.
then just have small wins the rest of the day, and it just changes your whole attitude.
Yeah, boy, do you ever touch on something, I think, Scott, that's really important. It's when I get a chance to speak with my clients, um, when we talk about something like CBT, or maybe you've heard about cognitive behavioral therapy. Well, cognitive, right, the thinking
Yeah.
part, it usually starts with the way that we think. And the question is it possible to change the way that I think, my thinking pattern, which may have led me down some paths at some point that weren't very productive for me or very helpful for me?
Are those habits,
with,
Kevin, that you're breaking?
yeah, I believe they are. I think thinking patterns are really important. Um, it sort of looks like a triangle, Scott. Like at the top, we usually have this cognition or thinking that leads us to feeling something, and then we do something. So, in a way, that's the whole idea around cognitive behavioral therapy is my thinking patterns. And sometimes that thinking pattern really throws us a curveball. I like your example about, you're talking about with people that you're dealing with is, okay, be really productive, get the small win over that 2-hour period and move that a little bit forward, just move it a point forward. The same thing, I think when I'm speaking with clients is, regardless of whether it's your work life or your career, or maybe it's relationships with your kids, a good thought is, how do I take where I am and just move it a half point or move it a point forward on a scale of
Small
0
wins.
to 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, small wins. That's what it's really about. Because some people will get caught into the thinking pattern is, I either won or I lost, or it's black or it's white. And if I engage in that kind of thinking, then it loses.
Yeah, so this was actually at the end of my little thing that I wanted to talk about, but you had mentioned something about the importance of goals in life, and I just strongly disagree with that. I'm willing to be educated, obviously, but it's exactly that point. I always say to my clients, in a turnaround. Now, I'm dealing with extreme change, like you are at the personal level. You're dealing with trying to extreme change, not just little kind of ticking along.
Right.
And I would say to them, okay, let's say you lost 4 million last year. Just making up a number.
Okay.
And let's say I create a financial model and a budget that says we're going to do a turnaround for a year, and at the end of that, you will have made 3 million. So there's a 7 million delta, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say at the end of the year, I got to $1.5 million positive. So I'm 50% of budget, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I a loser? Like I went from -4 to 1.5 positive, but I said I was going to get to 3, and I only got to 1.5. And the typical response I find is, well, you should have lessened your budget because it was unrealistic. You were never going to get there. And my response is, you'll never get to the $1.5 million unless you think to yourself, how do I get to 3? directionally,
Yeah.
not as an
Yeah.
absolute goal, because I don't believe in goals. I believe in aim. This is the direction I'm going. I might change that tomorrow, by the way, but this is the direction I'm going today.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't really care if I get there. I care if I'm moving in that direction.
Right, right. Again, I'm thinking about our hockey days, and when you played hockey, Scott, and you play some golf as well, I know, and I play golf. I love playing golf. When I'm trying to make some changes in my life, or I'm trying to make some, use the golf analogy as well. I think sometimes it pays to keep it simple, stupid. Like, dummy it down a bit, keep it simple, and work on a few basic things that are going to move that scale a little bit. So if I'm not playing golf well, I better think of my foot placement, or I better think of how I'm following through the ball, or turning that belt buckle to the target. Those are the types of things that I want to focus on, and I don't necessarily want to look at my score at the end of the day.
Exactly.
But you asked me about habits earlier. I think it's all about habits. I think it's about having those good habits so that I can advance. And even if the numbers don't show up, if I could make sure that I'm developing those habits as I go, that's a hell of a lot better than if I don't develop those habits.
We're on the same page. So, and the golf is a good analogy. So it's not my goal is to lower my handicap from 15 to 10. That's not my goal. My goal, I describe it as I want to get a lower handicap. So I'm going to create a system, a routine, and let's see how that works. And that system routine for me would be, I'm going to take a 3/4 swing on every shot in my head, for example, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that is exactly my issue in golf. And, right. And then it moves you in the direction you want to go. And if that's routine, that system isn't working, then you change that. But I don't worry about whether I went from a 15 to a 10 or whatever the numbers are.
Yeah. I think what ties into that concept as well is, am I motivated? Do I have the motivation necessary to do the things that I need to do in my life, so that I'm able to propel myself forward?
I'm so flustered by that issue. Like you walk into a business, and it's funny, in the last month, I think I told you this in prep for this show, that I've done 32 hours of personal branding consulting, whereas I'm being consulted too, with some high-end personal brandbuildersgroup.com. They're outstanding. Check them out. They'll like that. Anyway, so they're putting words to feelings that I've never thought about before, and not necessarily my feelings, although a lot about my feelings, but about what my clients are feeling when I step in, and the businesses, and they put words to it that would never have occurred to me, but they put the words of disorientation. Like you're in the middle of a forest, and you don't know where you are, and you don't know where you want to go, and that manifests itself, I find, in a complete lack of wanting things to get better, because their comfort zone is the shit that they're in all the time. Does that make any sense? Do you see so. That?
Yeah.
I don't know what to do about that one, other than you just try to drag them into small wins, and eventually maybe they break out of it. But that would be my only thought about that.
Yeah, theoretically, there's different people that have theories of what motivates people, and what sort of keeps the engine churning. One of the authors that I like to read, and is lots of stuff out there on YouTube as well, is Daniel Pink, who says that motivation is really the result of three different things. The first one is this development of mastery, that I have a sense that I can get better at something. So if I work at something, I can get better at it. The second concept is that I have a certain level of autonomy. Then you can get into the whole thing of being micromanaged versus being autonomous, that I'm responsible for, so for the gains that I have as well as the losses that that happen to me. And the third thing is purpose, and giving some thought to that. What is my purpose? What are some of the things that are drivers for me? Looking at your life, looking at being reflective, being self-aware about, maybe it's the things that you value. Maybe it's the things in your life that are important. Maybe it's some of the things that you used to do when you were younger that have fallen off the table, that you don't do anymore, or do less of. So mastery, autonomy, purpose. I like to go back to that and think about that, because I think in my own life that drives my motivation as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have to think about how to turn that into how I work with a management team, because I don't know the answer. To me, it's about aim. If you know where you're going, I have two problems. One is, there has to be aim, and you just see listless or disoriented management teams that, I think at the end of the day, it's just so dark. There is no light at the end of the tunnel. They don't even know which way the tunnel's going to look for the light. And so, that's a big issue that I find difficult, to navigate with those people. And the other one is, I think just in the modern, I don't want to say generation because that puts an age thing on it, but just where we are in today's culture, there's just a real focus on happiness as opposed to purpose. And to me, happiness is a symptom. Happiness, first of all, it's a mental choice, but in many respects, it's not a mental choice, and it's a symptom of, you're happy because you have purpose and you add value, and there's a reason. And then if you're lucky, you get some happiness out of that. But if you're tired, focused, you wake up in the morning saying, my job today is to be happy. Well, there's unhappy shit that happens to you in life, right?
Yeah.
And so that's my take on it. I don't know if I'm out of my mind or not, but
when you're talking about that, Scott, I don't know, that sort of goes back to business class 101, when we're talking about sort of the things that we need in our life, or happiness, for that example. It always sort of reminds me of this hierarchy, this Maslow's hierarchy. You remember that?
Needs, yeah.
Yeah, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So what's along the bottom of that hierarchy? Well, it's the basic things that we need to get along. Like we need a place to live, we need a reasonable income, and then after we have those things, we could look at safety and security, and get to the point where, maybe we could look back on our lives and say, yeah, you know what, I did what I wanted to do. I changed some people's lives. I had some purpose, and I still have some purpose. I have a passion for getting up every day.
Yeah.
Just a quick story. Funny, I met a guy. I was out walking, and I don't know about you, Scott, but I'm walking tons these days. So I'm out.
I'm walking tons, but Kevin, here I only meet grizzly bears. So and angry moose. So,
That's right. I met this 92-year-old guy, and he's kind of sitting along the sidewalk on one of these strollers. He could sit down, and I had a little chat with him. And it was really interesting talking to this older guy. And there's a guy who I would say, he's kind of at the top of that pyramid, that he's done a lot of things in his life. And it was just good to, just to talk to people who have, worked in the business world and had done some of the things that he wanted to do. And he's near the end of his life now. Just an interesting guy. And I think that's one of those guys that hits that self-actualization point where it's like, okay, my life is pretty good. I've lived a pretty good life.
That's right. And the word is self-actualization or fulfillment. It's not happiness.
Yeah.
It's not a flirting, transient kind of feeling of happiness, which everybody's chasing, I find, in today's culture. And it just seems a bad business plan, because if that's how you define yourself, 100% guaranteed you're going to be unhappy.
Right. Can I ask you a question again, Scott? I'm curious, with your daughter and her age, if that's frustrating for you as a parent, if you see
100%.
that, if you see that now in the schools where we'll throw things at kids all the time and we'll tell them, you're the best, you're doing really well, here's a ribbon. There's not really, back in our day, there was more, you won, you lost. Now the message is very different. And the message with, you know, in sort of preparation or thinking about the talk we're going to have today, I'm thinking about parenting styles too, because I think that has a lot to do with sort of where we're at in terms of mental health and whether how we perceive stress and how we perceive worry.
Because they've never experienced stress before or failure.
Right. That's right.
No, 100%. So, my daughter transitioned from Toronto, where she was in the Waldorf system, which is, you know me, so I would be negative intuitively about the structure of that. And I was super pleasantly surprised by how she developed in that system. Mm-hmm. And then we moved to Fernie. And one of the reasons we wanted to move here, but I was worried about moving to a small town in, the middle of nowhere. But there's a private academy in this town, which is the complete antithesis of the Waldorf Academy. It's like the Germanic headmistress kind of thing. And like, near as I can tell, they're handing out detentions like candy to kids. And so I don't think that's driven from school. Now, it's a culture shock for my daughter for sure, but she's a good kid. She's adopted really well. But, it's funny. She's probably, so she just turned 7 and she skis, Rocky Mountain Black Diamond runs with me. And she might be, I'm just making this up, but she's probably one of the top.
Hey, she sounds fun.
Yeah. She's one of the top 5 to 10 in her age group in BC, which puts you pretty serious as a skier, I think, on a worldwide scale. And so, but she went to the club championship last year because she's on a ski team, and she won every other race during the year, like by a mile. Then she goes to club championship, and it was all ice, and she's only ever skied out west, and it freaked her out. And she finished 4th. So whatever, it's all good. But then she keeps telling me how awesome she did because she finished 4th. I did really good, and she tells other people, and I just like 4th isn't winning. Like, this goes back to this whole point of there's a difference between success and not success. And if you did your best, good on you. If you did your best and you finished 4th, great, right? Then I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
Did you really do your best, or did you let fear overtake you in that situation? And if that's what happened, fine. But let's not walk around saying we did great. Let's walk around saying we're going to be better at that next time. So I'm trying to do that. And I do find it frustrating, that part for sure. But on the other hand, Kevin, I think confidence is everything.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think what happens with kids as well is that they need somebody to say, hey, I think you're going to be good at this, or I think you did well at this. It's when it's excessive that it's counterintuitive.
They need to know the difference between good and not so good.
Right.
Or good and okay, or awesome and okay. Like, there's a distinction there, right?
Totally agree. And maybe it goes back to what we were talking about before, that maybe the discussion is, like our golf example, is, okay, you had this time in your race, or you did these things well. How do we build on that so that on that scale that we just get a little bit better? So maybe it is dealing with worry, or maybe it is dealing with disappointment. What do we do that's going to move us along that scale just a little bit so that I become a better, stronger, more confident person in the long run, right?
So I was, to put this into a business example, I was brought into a turnaround of a largest processing company in the food business in Toronto for the last year. And they were losing a bunch of money. And they brought me in and they said, oh, we've hired this high-end turnaround guy. He's going to really whip us into shape. I said, you know what? I think I'm probably going to do exactly the opposite. And when we went in there, when I went in there, what you had was a culture of people with their, something would go wrong and they put their head down and they didn't talk and no one wanted to have a solution. There was no teamwork. So what do? Do you yell at them? Do you beat them up? Do you start firing people? And what I believe in when we talk about the habit loop and your cognitive behavior
Yeah.
triangle, the habit triangle is cue at the top, routine, reward. So,
Yes.
the cue for me is midnight. The routine is I order a double cheese pizza. The reward is, right? The reward is whatever I get out of that.
Yes.
And the cue is going to happen, right? So what you need to do is change the routine that delivers the same reward or a better reward. And it's the same in an organization. And what I tell people, management teams, is if everything has a policy and a procedure to it. Now, if you didn't create that policy and procedure, then the organization created it itself, right?
Yeah.
It's not like it doesn't exist. They just have it. It's their habit. That's what they do, right? So you need to identify that. What we need to do is identify that. So what we did is you find this, this keystone routine, something that impacts everything. So we said, well, okay, a cue is that our manufacturing line shuts down. Like, that's pretty simple. There's no debate about whether that was a trigger or not. We were supposed to produce 100 units today, and we stopped at 40. And why did we stop at 40? Well, that could be an HR issue. It could be a materials handling issue. It could be a maintenance issue. It could be anything that sort of spreads throughout the organization could have caused that. And then, now what's the routine? Well, the routine normally was everybody went and hid and blamed the other person, or they just didn't care, right? So now the routine is, you got to write down why this happened, and you need to propose a solution. And when you do that, you get a reward, which was a $25 gift card or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, in 3 months, the entire culture of this business changed. Like, it just spreads throughout the organization. It just spread, and I wasn't yelling at people. Now I was saying, you need to do your goddamn reports and you're going to get your reward. Like, you had to convince them that this was real and it wasn't a trick, because they all think it's a trick at first, right? But you identify this habits, and and then after 6 months, we just gave up doing it because everybody was working so well together that they just proactively started coming up with ideas. And we just, in a year,
cool story.
In a year, it was a complete change of attitude and morale within the company. Which is not to say I didn't fire a whole bunch of people, because I did. Because what you identify is what we talked about before. The people that have become so jaded, they're just too much work to find the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's better for them to go somewhere else.
Scott, that sounds a lot. It sounds like what the framework of that is. I read a book a few years ago, and I'm trying to think. The author was Duhigg, and
that's
the book
entirely
was
where I stole it from.
Yeah, the power of habit.
Power of habit, and that was a steel company turnaround. The guy did it on safety. And I actually did a show about that very book. That's one of my top 5 business books. I love that book.
That's awesome. But you also mentioned another thing too. That's a great story, and that's something that could really change a culture of an organization, is the way that you address problems, or the way that you talk about problems. You said before that there's a good example of nobody was talking to each other, or everybody's playing the blame game. So how do you facilitate that as a manager or as a leader, that you open up those channels so that people actually have an opportunity to chat with each other, talk with each other, and be honest and open with each other without playing this blame game?
Reward. You need to encourage it. And then you need to reward it, because habits change with reward. That's kind of the whole point of that routine. So you create a formalized system so everybody knows, and there's no debate, and you can't let people off the hook. That's a big deal. You have to be crystal clear. There's an art to this. You can't pick a trigger. Like, my trigger was the line shut down. Well, that's not up for debate, right? If my trigger was there weren't enough materials there, well, that's gonna, now you could debate that. Yeah, maybe there weren't enough of this material of input A, but that really wasn't me, it was him, right? It's up for debate. You can't have any gray area in this. It's just gotta be a toggle switch. It's just got to be binary. It either ran, or we either produced what we're supposed to produce today, or we didn't. If we didn't, who's got a solution, and you get a reward. Like as simple as that. And
Scott,
and that's
did the guy or the gal on the front line, did they have an opportunity for input on that as well?
That's like, the person that did it. No, it starts at the bottom. It wasn't to the plant manager that was getting this. It was the person on the line. That's where you start. You know, the day laborer.
Very good.
Yeah, because then it just filters throughout the organization. Because you know, these people aren't, you know, they're making minimum wage or they're making $5 above minimum wage, but that doesn't make them stupid. Like they know what's going on.
Yeah.
And if you want to affect change, again, this is not a normal company that's spitting out a bunch of cash and has got a moderate growth rate. This is affecting rapid change. So let me give you an example. So the very first day, you know, so the idea was they have to stage their materials for the run, and this was a food company, so they need eggs for that production line. And so everybody staged their stuff for the various lines, and we shut down because we ran out of eggs. Well, how is that possible, right? And the answer was, well, I went and counted the eggs, and the other guy over here went and counted the eggs, but they were the same damn eggs, right? And so, you know, what's the solution? Well, we're going to segregate our eggs so we have our own, right? And, you know, we're going to color code them or whatever. Like, it's a pretty simple solution. So I said, I love this example because what's my alternative? Was I going to write a policy about having your own eggs? Like, I wasn't going to think of that, right? Like, I will never fix these problems by top down, you know, checklists and solutions, which is the only other way that I know to go about it, right? You're either forcing this down their throat or you're creating an environment where it's coming up and they're solving their own problems to a large degree, which doesn't mean you don't have to support them. It doesn't mean you don't have to vet the solutions that they put forward, right? But you got to create the teamwork and the communication.
Was it a unionized or non-unionized environment? That'll really change the dynamic of things as well, right?
Depends on the union. You know, some unions they want things to be better.
Yeah.
Some don't care, in my opinion. But look at it. This is about empowerment and treating the employee with respect, not the opposite. Right? Yeah. They're actually getting a gift at the end of the day out of this. Actually, you know what? There was a union threat when I stepped in and it went away. There's an answer to your question.
There you go. Not bad. I think it goes back to what we were talking about when we started the show today, Scott, about, I think we were talking about, you know, just good sound mental health, and, you know, whether it's on the personal level or whether it's an organizational level, there has to be a sense there that I've got some control over what I do. Like, I've got some control over the way that I govern my own life or my work life. And that's a great example about, you know, if I have input into a place that that I work every day, and that I could influence what actually happens here, whether I work on the ground floor, whether I'm on the leadership team. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit. So sure. I've had an example that I don't have an answer for, and maybe other business owners have had the similar example. I've had an employee work for me with clear mental health issues. Yeah, I have no idea what they were. I'm going to guess depression, or I'm going to guess suicidal, but I don't know that for a fact. I do know that this particular person worked for me for about a year, self-reported to the police at least 3 times that I recall, you know, reaching out for help, and got taken away to a local hospital in Toronto there. Yeah. And I had no idea what to do about that, if anything. What I learned was that I could tell when the episodes were coming on, because things go in waves, and turns out maybe she was on her meds and then off her meds, and which I assume is a typical thing. But I could tell when things were going sideways for her. And then what I learned was, the minute I picked up the phone, not thinking about that, it would say, "Where is this?" I'm like, "I needed this done." and the whole firm's falling apart because you didn't do your role, that
Mhm.
was a trigger. I became a
Yeah.
trigger for the issue. And that's not a happy place to be for me or any business owner. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm sure certain other managers face that situation.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a very difficult thing, and I think that has multiple levels to it. One of them is, first of all, I would make sure or have conversations, because that's you mentioned that about being important is the idea of communication. So having a conversation and saying, what do you need? Are you getting the level of support that you need, either A, at the company, or B, medically? And are you doing everything medically that is necessary? That discussion is always going to start with the family doctor. Family doctor is going to be the person that is going to be the person that it can refer. If it's psychiatrist, if it's going to a facility like CAMH, for example, if it's an inpatient or outpatient program, supporting the employee that way. Also, I think it's talking, Scott, about what is it that we can improve on? Go back to our scale again. What is it that we can do, or is it possible that we can modify things at work that are going to work better for you? And let's and have the employee tell you.
Kevin, so my experience was that this person was so despondent, she didn't care. She didn't care about herself.
Well, the question I would ask then, Scott, is does it put anybody else, herself or anybody else, at risk at work? And if it does, then you reserve the right as a manager to take action on that. So if there is a risk, then let's talk about a safety plan, right? So if this person is actively suicidal, then let's talk about a safety plan, because that is the number one thing. How do we keep you safe? Not only that, how do we keep other people safe?
It's hard, man. It's hard. It's if you're a small business, that's we're a mid-sized business. We had a little bit of sophistication to us, but I just can't imagine being a small business owner and having to deal with that, because every employee is so key. So you're not getting productivity, which causes you problems, and then you're just worried about anything you say to this person is going to trigger something personally bad.
Right.
For that person.
Go back. It's very delicate, isn't it, Scott? Like I would go back to what can I do to help? And the questions that I would ask the organization is, from an organizational point of view, is there an employee assistance program that might be able to help? Have you seen a doctor? Are there recommendations from that? What can we do to accommodate your schedule? Those sorts of things. But as soon as it crosses over into either employees at risk or other people in the organization are at risk, then I think you reserve the right as an employee. But I think what makes that delicate as well is the human rights issue that employees who have a mental health issue have while they're working while they're in the workplace.
I mean, you need to talk to your lawyer about that kind of stuff.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Getting short on time, but I want to.
Okay.
We're not doing a COVID show. I'm sick of COVID. I'm done with it.
So
Having said that, I think, Kevin, we're at a time. I live in the troubled company world, rapid change world. I'm used to the stress level. But we have every single small and medium-sized business on the face of the earth has been impacted by this, and everybody's in a liquidity crunch. And so you've got, if I live in the 20% or the 10% down here, the other 80% are who people are just, running their business, and they've always been happy and they're making money. And suddenly they've got pressures that they've never seen before, and they have no idea what to do about it. And I talk endlessly, which is why I'm sick about it, about business strategies for dealing with that.
Yeah.
But if they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, if they can't manage their stress, they're not going to succeed. So what are your,
Agreed.
you must see this in your practice a lot right now. So
Absolutely.
what are you doing about it? Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say for you, Scott, or for managers that that are watching your show as well, it's also refer. So again, we talked about it starts medically. It starts with your family doctor. So there's a lot of different programs, and some of those programs are free programs that a person might not even know about, or might not even be aware existed, that might be able to help them. That's something maybe that you don't have to worry about that much. Start with the family doctor. Start with somebody.
But
like
Kevin, what if they're not going to do that because they're, everything was going along swimmingly until mid-March, and now it's just dark, and they're just like, wow, I don't even, like, that just hit me from nowhere.
Yeah.
I feel down, I'm depressed, but they're not going to go to their doctor to deal with that necessarily. They need coping strategies.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if they were talking to you.
Yeah.
Is there,
what I would do to answer that, Scott, is, like, let's say, back to our sports analogy, let's say I'm not having a good stretch of my season here. I'm feeling like shit. I don't feel like I'm confident. What's the best thing that's going to help that player? The best thing that's going to help that player is that somebody is going to take them aside and say, hey, you know what? You are good at these particular things. Maybe you should try X, Y, and Z. You or me or other people that have been, quote unquote, successful, at some point, I think somebody's taken us aside and has given us that guidance or that mentoring that's going to be important. So I would say to those viewers that are watching the show is find somebody to connect to. Don't do things in isolation. And guys are typically pretty bad with that. I'm the lone wolf. I'm gonna ride this out. I'm gonna do what's necessary. Reach out to somebody that's a friend. Do those things that you really enjoy doing, that you get joy out of. Whether it's a game of golf, whether it's connecting, whether it's playing cards, whether it's travel, when that comes back online. Do those things. Continue to have those conversations. Ask for advice. Those things are really important.
Is it true? Because I think it is. That someone in your position, we all, complete layperson like me would think, well, I'm going to go to a therapist of some sort and I'm going to get some advice. But the truth is, it's the act of talking that helps you think and get your thoughts clear.
Right.
Isn't that what these business owners ought to be doing right now? They ought to be just talking to their accountant, talking to their friend,
right?
Like just talking it out. Not because they're going to expect the magic bullet, but because the act of actually communicating helps them get their thoughts clear. Does that make any sense? From your perspective?
That's exactly true. We process things in different ways, Scott. So if something is happening, if I'm concerned or I'm worried about getting my business up and running, or my supply chain or whatever is going on, some people really get benefit from talking about that. Other people, they're active. They like to do things. So that's important. Some people are, they focus on things that are kind of mindful, or that relaxes them. Those things are important as well. So I tell people it's like going to the buffet. Some things you're going to take and other things you're going to leave behind. But what is it at the buffet that's going to help you? And we pick and choose some of the things. One of the things that's very common is talk therapy, is that we talk.
Yeah. You know what I've started doing in the last year, which blows me away that I would actually do this. And I love it. So I get up in the morning and I wander down to my computer with my first coffee, and I'm half asleep and I'm feeling like, And the very first thing on my to-do list every morning on repeat is, for lack of a better word, I don't know if it's the right word, but a mantra. And I just say 3 or 4 things on it, which are, my 3 are positive, hustle, integrity. That's what I'm going to do today. And I remind myself that today is the only day I have to be healthy and to accomplish this particular life business goal, right?
Yeah.
I remind
Yeah.
myself to pace and lead, which is my way of telling myself not to be a dick. Like I don't have to be combative with everybody, and that's it. And I do, and honestly, Kevin, it's like I immediately wake up and I'm excited for my day. It's
That's cool.
really an amazing thing, and it just sounds, even as I'm telling you, it sounds hokey, and I would, the younger me would never have accepted this, but wow, is it powerful.
Well, people are, you hear about that all the time about doing these mindful activities. A lot of people into yoga and meditation. Why do they do that? Is it it's because they focus on the here and now. This is what I have right now. I'm not thinking about those things in the past that have led me down the wrong path, or I'm not thinking about all those things in the future that I have to do. I am right here, right now. And for me, that's a great way to reduce stress. Mantra certainly is one of them. We have to repeat to remember.
Right.
Which is exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. So the problems with COVID and the stress that's created, is that a lot to do? I mean, you're out of money, that causes stress, obviously. But does a lot of it have to do with just being incapable or unknowing how to make a decision faced with extreme uncertainty? I mean, my feeling is that's a big part of the issue. And there's strategies for that, right?
Yeah. That goes back to, I think, what we were talking about, Scott, with anxiety, because with anxiety, it's pretty simple. We see something up here that is, these are the things that I'm worried about. And at the same time, what's going on simultaneously is I don't think I have the stuff that's going to be able to cope with those worries that I'm experiencing. So again, it goes back to the thinking patterns that we talked about earlier. Is it possible to change my thinking pattern? A lot of people subscribe to this, I wouldn't say a lot, but maybe increasingly are subscribing to this sort of 80-20 or 90-10 rule, is that whatever happens in their lives, 90% of it is the way that I perceive it. 10% might be what's happening. So my perception of an event, you could see a car crash and you could have 5 people that have seen the crash, and they're going to all perceive that quite differently. I think it's the same thing when we're dealing with stress or we're dealing with anxiety. How do I perceive my stress? How do I perceive my anxiety? I think that's an important. It's
funny, I heard just the headline. I haven't found it yet, but there was a study released just a couple of days ago, I think, about stress being a killer, and they've decided that stress only kills you if you think it does.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Did you know that? Is that?
Yeah, that's very common.
Really?
A lot of the docs that have patients that are, I know this because I hear this from my wife, who's a family doc. A lot of the patients that have suffered heart attacks are going through post-surgery, for example. They'll often be sent to a mindfulness stress reduction type course where where using these mindfulness techniques are as effective as taking a medication. So CBT, or changing those thinking patterns in conjunction with a stress reduction pattern, could be really, really helpful for some people.
We've sort of hit the top of the hour here, Kevin. What have we not touched on that you wanted to touch on? Anything?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to just what we were talking about before. I think one of the keys to this whole thing, Scott, is how do we talk to each other? How do we communicate? It's not only a COVID phenomena that we're seeing right now. I think that's in general. So I think a great way to deal with some of these issues that we were talking about is it's okay. It's okay to reach out. It's okay to get advice. If you've got an opportunity to mentor somebody, I would take that opportunity, because I get that opportunity. I work with students, I work with business leaders, I work with the general public, and I really appreciate that myself, and it energizes me as well when I get a chance to do that. So
That's what this show is all about,
I really
right?
encourage your listeners to do the same. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so, I started this as just because I love podcasts. So I thought, oh, that'd be cool. Let's give it a shot, see what happens. And it's so, I don't want to say fulfilling. That's an overused word, but it's fun. You know, I enjoy it. And we have a small viewership, listener base so far, because it takes a long time to build this up, but it's growing all the time. But more importantly, every single person that reaches out to me is super supportive. You know, it's been
Awesome.
really, yeah, and I really think it adds value, which is a good thing, right? And if we can't add value, if we can't add value at our age, like when are we going to do that? So.
Hey, you're still a spring chicken. What are you talking about?
That's true. That's true. Everything's relative. Kevin, how do people reach you, and why should they reach you?
They could reach me directly on my cell. I give my cell phone number out, which is 289-937-1716, or they can reach me through my website, which is www.changeworksinteractive.com.
We'll get those in the notes for you. And why should people reach you?
If they want to talk to me about things that are going on either in their personal life or their work life, I would be happy to talk to them. Or maybe it's some of the topics that we talked about today. Change, maybe a stressful time that they're going through. I think I'd be able to offer them some strategies that might be able to help.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but in addition to what we spoke about today, you're doing, I don't want to say career counseling. Is that the right word?
Yeah, I do career counseling, but I'll
and
do
executive coaching.
Yeah,
that sort of.
Yeah. So all of those things I would be quite comfortable doing. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This has been Martinis with Scott, a show about winning momentum in business and in life. Please subscribe. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Okay, I got to stop recording, and we can